I'm very happy to be here to share whatever it is that you'd like to ask from me. It was many years ago. The year was 1986, so it's been over 30 years, I think. And I was living in California at the time, and I was connected to a spiritual work group, and I was working at a counseling center. And I encountered Marshall Rosenberg is coming, and there was a connection in my spiritual work group. A family member brought him to the area where I lived. And my first encounter with him was at an introductory evening workshop. And it was just an evening, just a few hours. And the memory that is prominent for me in my experience of Marshall wasn't so much anything about understanding the process, as a methodology or a technique. But I think it was the quality, the energy that he brought and how he invited the people, the participants, into dialogues. And as he brought them in front of the room and empathized with them, and as he did a role play with his puppets and demonstrated empathic listening, and also acknowledged the kind of judgmental, reactive thinking that everyone participates in, sort of enabled us to recognize this kind of, oh yes, I do that, I act that way, and how that's translated into an empathic, compassionate response. And there's something about the experience of that and the quality that I experienced that touched my heart. It's as though something reached into a deep longing in me, a deep longing that I've had all of my life. And I didn't even think about at that moment, well, how is this going to sort of fit into my life personally or professionally? But I was very moved by that quality. And it was from that quality that motivated me into follow-up with him. So it just happened that time that he was coming to the area in which I lived, that he was offering immediately, maybe the next day or the next couple of days, a 5-day kind of immersion workshop, and I decided I'm going to go for it. So I did this 5-day workshop in nonviolent communication, and I was very moved by it. And it was so different and radical for me. I remember it was about the 3rd day that I started to actually really get it, because some of the concepts, some of the differentiations were so new to me, even though I had studied psychology and I was counseling and studied many theories and approaches. There were some elements there that were so unique that touched a kind of a deep, aha, this is a missing piece. This is an important piece. Some of the elements, there's too many to name. One of them was, for example, the identification of authentic feelings and differentiating that with the kind of thinking that we express as a feeling that's actually a thought. Even in psychology at that point, I did not see that distinction. And the quality of deep empathic listening, the invitation for authenticity, the space that invites that was very moving and inspiring for me. And it had an effect on my intimate relationship, my partner at the time, and our relationship. And professionally, it had the same kind of impact, because I was in counseling, I was therapy. As a therapist, I was about to become licensed as a therapist. And so I decided that because it was so impactful that I wanted to apply the nonviolent communication principles and the process to support people, both in individual support, and I did a lot of couples support and family work. And I always applied the nonviolent communication principles in that context. And it was soon thereafter, maybe about a year after I was introduced, that I started actually teaching it. Teaching small workshops and starting practice groups, and that process evolved over many years. So that's a little bit of how I first became introduced. the central passion that I have is the spiritual basis of nonviolent communication, how my experience is that is fundamental and essential for living into the essence of what NVC is about. Well, if I look at the spirituality that is implicit in nonviolent communication, and I look at spirituality in a very broad and generalization around, where the heart of spirituality has to do with, say, our true nature. What is the quality of our true nature as human beings, as a human spirit? And so the true nature is that essential something, that essence that we awaken and awaken to, and as the objective or the goal or the manifestation of what our intention is in spiritual practice. And so that's the element that I did not see or wasn't evident to me in the practice of NVC, because so much of it was focused on human communication that seemed to be a different sort of stream of development and evolution with human beings. And yet the more I experienced and studied NVC, I became much more clear that the central and core aspect that I experienced with NVC is what's identified as universal human needs. The more I connected to the experience of needs, the more I discovered that this is the key to the human spirit. And so it was about 20 years ago that, after I developed a bit of clarity, that I started offering what I called NVC as a spiritual practice. And the element of human needs was the central core aspect of that. And the development of needs as an energetic, qualitative experience that is a prior condition that we can tap into within the human heart. So that the essence of who we are as human beings, the essence of our heart, actually is the source of the life energy that gives impulse, that eventually shows up as our human needs, as what we essentially value, as what really matters to us. So then, in identifying that, I found to be really crucial, so that the development of the consciousness of needs then becomes the doorway to spirit. It becomes the doorway to true empowerment and authenticity. So these are, I guess, some of the key elements that I would identify. And one of the other elements in developing the spirituality of nonviolent communication is that it is essentially a consciousness based practice and way of living that is supported by the other aspect that can be said to be the cognitive elements, what can be seen as the mechanical elements with observations, feelings, needs, and requests. My experience, without the spiritual element, it becomes just a technique. It becomes a methodology that loses the spirit. So, for me, how I experience simplicity is, simplicity is simply free from the complexity of the analytical mind. So essentially, life energy and the qualities of life are simple, and simplicity can be said to be pure, unobstructed. Now, simplicity and simpleness for me is completely different than ease and easy. Because even though something is simple, it can, because of the conditioning, it can be very difficult to transform the tendencies of the analytical mind and all of the tendencies in complexity that we have to access simplicity. But for me, it's the core of it, that I can experience the essential nature and find the wisdom, the intelligence of the heart, and have that guide me. So the integration of the heart and the intelligence of the mind are integrated. I think that's a good question, and I think it has a multi-dimensional answer, but the simple discovery that I've discovered is it's simply because of our learning, simply because of the thousands of years of cultural conditioning, and because of the painful experiences and traumatic experiences that we have all lived through. that those experiences and the conditioning gives rise to something that we take in the human system that is life alienating. It disconnects us from our nature. The analytical mind disconnects us from the natural condition of our human body, and it disconnects us from the natural condition of life itself, the earth and the sky and animals and all of that. It also gives rise to the desire to manage and control and manipulate nature, manipulate the nature and to disconnect from feeling. So there's a lot of reasons why, but I think it's essentially the conditioning, the learning we've taken in, and the painful experiences that we've all lived through. The living of nonviolent communication. Yeah, for me, this is very much tied into the spirituality or the spiritual basis. So in order to live it, that means that it is embodied for me, which is different than practicing a mechanical process. Now, at certain stages of integrating and learning the nonviolent communication process, just like learning a musical instrument, you have to learn by playing the scales and developing the skills and the technique and developing the technical aspect of it. That is a part of it. But when that becomes relegated to the central aspect of nonviolent communication, for me, that is not what NVC is. Now, what I consider to be the core element of nonviolent communication is the embodied living of it. So what that means is that living means there's a certain consciousness, conscious awareness that is embodied, that when I'm in a state of compassion, or I am living the quality of you matter and I matter, then that's something that I live. By that I mean, living means is more than communication. It's everything I see, everything I smell, I hear, when I speak, what I think, what my emotions are, what my sensations are. All of that is living. And if I'm living in the wholeness of my being, I'm thinking, I'm seeing, I'm feeling, I'm sensing, that are all in alignment with this consciousness of fullness and wholeness, authenticity, mutual care, and all of those qualities. And without living it, I'm not confident that sharing and teaching it is going to be very effective. The most obvious and the quick answer has to do with the element of the universal human needs. Connecting needs as part of the totality of who we are as a human being, and the unified field that we all live in, and how we connect to needs and bring it into the relationship space. How do we actualize the spirituality and the unification, the qualities of compassion and understanding and contribution? How do we actualize that in the real, practical communication space? And not just communication, but the collaborative actions that take place in co-creating systems and relationships, all of that. So the element of the needs is, to me, one of the pieces that is unique to nonviolent communication and integrated with the essence or the evolutionary sort of unfolding of traditional spiritual practices. That's what I think is really essential. And you can say it makes it complete. To me, it creates a kind of complete spirituality. Absolutely. Much of my previous practice has been in alignment with Advaita, however you pronounce it, non-dual. And it's difficult to try to express philosophically or intellectually, but for me it is the heart of my understanding of non-duality is that there is already a prior unity. It's not something that we achieve. It's something that we discover, that we awaken to. And one of the elements of this prior unification is that it contains all of the interrelationships in all of life. So it includes multiplicity. So the longing and the objective of nonviolent communication is, how do we find this, how do we discover and cultivate the unity within the multiplicity, the unity within the space of relationship. So when I truly am connected to the heart of living compassion and nonviolent communication, it requires that I am already in the unity. I'm already in the longing of what is possible. And so when I live from this, when I see this, when I communicate from this place, I'm not trying to reach or achieve something. I'm trying to create the conditions in my communication with others that allows that prior unity to emerge simply because of the conditions that we create in our communication. I don't achieve unity, it's revealed. It emerges because we see each other in a certain way and we practice that. We act with each other in a certain way and we actualize the unity that's already there, perhaps you can say, in that field of possibilities. So that's the understanding that I have and that sort of guides me in what I do. I do have that vision to reach in what it is that I'm offering. I sense that it's hungry. People are hungry for this. There's a deep desire for this. And everywhere I go in these small groups, I get this confirmation and resonance of an answer to a deep hunger. I mean, I'm not the only one. There are many people offering and meeting this deep desire and hunger. And my dream and my vision is that this consciousness and this possibility can reach larger numbers of people. One of the ways that I find this happens is that in the groups of people that I work with, it's like planting seeds. And people share with me that they take this and they go out into their networks. And I imagine people in their networks go out and take it into their networks. So in some way that's probably unseen and unmeasurable, I get feedback constantly that people are taking the body of this work, the spirit of, and it's spreading in that way. The other vision that I have is that somehow I'm in the process of beginning to create an online program that can reach larger numbers of people. Now this is in development, and as it is an experimental process, I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but the intention is that people who can't attend the live retreats and workshops that I offer, simply because of limitation of time and space and money, will have at least some access to what I'm offering. And an access in terms of not just receiving what I'm sharing, but to develop networks and partnerships within people. To say there's 100 or 200 people that engage in an online program, they can develop connections and relationships and networks with each other and develop ways of practicing and deepening this process. I love sharing what I share. I love the reception, the quality of the relationships that I meet in people who receive, because I learn a lot from people. It's not that I have some understanding that I'm spreading, but my learning takes place in the field of the relationships as I share and I receive and I explore with other people. That's where most of my deep learning takes place.